Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is a profile in uniqueness. This is that time I'm telling you the story of my dear friend, Craig Allen Hansen, pictured behind me here. And I think this way of doing this is appropriate. He was, like I said, a unique man. He is the epitome of uniqueness. He died Christmas Eve, 2022, after having had many years of strokes, multiple five, I think it was. And he was all said and done. The first stroke, he had plans for novels and things that never came to light. He was down for a few years, began to recover, and then God had turned. Strokes hit him, ravaged him, and not able to even return. He'd written one book and planned to write three after, but the stroke hit. We had a full plan of a full series that would be completed by the end of that particular year. Lies told us, but alas, it was not to be. One of the things that Craig was a storyteller. He a novelist. Is that most intensive novel, and the one he put the most in that he put into work was The Woodsman, a serial killer story of a very unique bet, worth looking. So right now I'm rambling. Many of you that are watching this, are watching this as the introduction to becoming confidently unique in Christ Summit. Others are you just watching because it's posted. Whoever watches this, hope you're blessed. But in particular, those in the summit, because Craig is all about what it is that I get at the heart of for the summit, for the folks that do watch and be inspired. This is an inspiration point. So let me tell you a bit about this man, Craig Allen Hansen. See, I met Craig back in, it would have had to have been 1980 or 81. Or no, not 81, 80. And it was 1984, 1985, actually. I was going to high school. I didn't know high school. My brain is a little foggy at the moment. But 84, 85, because I graduated in 87, we were together in 1986, 87. So 84, 85, maybe 83, 84, maybe it was, 3 years at Mankato State University in Campus Crusade. So here's how I first met this man. I think we were at a Christmas conference or some conference of some sort, and or some level. I remember, another friend of mine named, I think it was Tagros. Could have been both, either Tagros and Greg Hensel, both of them go, hey, you need to take some time to get to know this individual. I think you two will hit it off. And see, I was a little bit different than they both. Both Greg and Todd were more typical, alpha male, popular kind of, a bit. A little bit different. Myself, even back then, had some social growing up to do myself. But we hit it off. The things that we hit it off around were Doctor Who, not Hugh, Doctor Who. And other things in terms of humor and various dynamics where we just hit it off. So much so that we ended up rooming together in my senior year, which was 1986 to 1987, and that wedged in the formation of our relationship for decades. But at the time, Craig, I had some social immaturity, mind you, but Craig was even more so socially immature at the beginning point. I had to encourage him to wear tennis shoes. He had these black, kind of velvety black or never black shoes that he wore. Yeah, he didn't know kind of how to fit in at all. Yeah, he was just a unique way. Although one thing he did have, you know, he had a medal, he had no stranger to it. Yeah, he did connect with a woman that they dated for a while. I certainly wasn't dating by any stretch of means. But he did actually for a while before that, yeah, crashed and burned. But also when I met him, when Todd introduced me or Greg, whoever it was, Craig was really at the beginning stages of relationships, but it formed and it grew over time. Yeah, so yeah, as it grew over time, we began to know more and more his heart. Yeah, and before talk about the elements of who he was as a person, I just want to talk about where he came from. That's part of the man's uniqueness. So where he came from, he was adopted. He was adopted and he grew up in Austin, Minnesota, and actually a subset of Austin, Minnesota called Rose Creek. He had another sibling, not biological, adoptive sibling. Her name was Paulette Hansen at that time, who likely had a bunch of reactive attachment stuff going on. It was a handful. They had a hard time with each other, and Paulette was a bit of a handful, from what I can say. Yeah, in that time when he was growing up, he told me that there was a period of time he had to go to a residential group home, whatever the chaos was with his parents, when I adopted parents, whatever was going on, whatever it was, he had to go to an adolescent group home. An adolescent group home by the name of Gerard. It still exists and they still do the thing. And down there in Austin, Minnesota, been around that long. But he told me, one of the things that he ended up harassing him by the other kids there. They harassed him to the point where they made him drink urine. And he could never drink Mountain Dew. He wouldn't drink Mountain Dew. I love Mountain Dew. He would have nothing to do with it because it reminded him trauma-wise of what had happened in that particular group home. And he was always upset. He remember talking to me as I was learning psychology. I tried to tell the counselors there stuff in confidence, and they went and told my parents anyways, and I didn't like that. Later I found out that was actually common, but it was concerned me at the time. I thought that wasn't so kosher at the time. I was a little naive there, but anyway, Craig was adopted. When I knew him, he was passionate about finding his birth mother and his birth family. He put time into it. He wasn't like it is now, open adoptions, whatever. People, he gave up their kid, disconnected, had no connections. It wasn't this kind of shopping market kind of selling yourself to be the adopter of a particular the individual's child. No, it was a completely different system. He did find his birth mother, mind you. It happened after I graduated from college, a few years after that. Remember the phone call and talking about it, and when he actually went to meet his birth mother, she would have nothing to do with it. Here's why. He was the product of rape. His mother was gang raped. She didn't adopt him. She didn't abort him. She was pushed certainly to abort him, but she gave birth to him and gave him up to adoption. And that's a very special thing that she did do, because this was a very unique man and very caring man. And so that was where he came from. Now, in that, he did have one connection strong that then lasted up until the day he died, and that was with his half sister. I can remember, when we were living together, as adults, when his sister came by and spent a couple of weeks in our apartment. Her name was Carrie. Carrie Curate, I believe. Is the name of his half sister. And so he got to have that connection. Out of it, even though learning this really horrible, awful thing. So, that's some of the pain in Craig's life, and so why he may have had some, different ways of being that people didn't fully understand or connect with. But here's an essential core of Craig. Some of the cores of Craig. Craig was a storyteller. he liked to tell a story. I tell you, it wasn't just writing down stories. He really liked to tell a story. You see, when we talked, it would be him on the phone, me listening, and him talking sometimes for hours and hours. He just loved to talk, about whatever, talk about, what he's doing writing, talk about this, talk about that, talk about, see, he was a talker, I was a listener. He's a storyteller, I was a listener. So he liked to tell a story. Craig is also very particular, very organized, very orderly, had to have things his way. Just had to have it. And so, and that was always, any disturbances kind of, you got him a little anxious and prone to get agitated when something was quite a little bit different. And he even had his routine and foods and the ways that he liked to do things, and they were generally not within the general, norms of what people would like. He certainly loves soy sauce. I believe you me, soy sauce was very common. So that was, he's very particular, but another aspect of music, he liked to sing. He loved singing. He actually had a good voice. His voice wasn't bad. And actually, in college, he had started a band. As soon as he was a lead singer, he found a keyboardist. He found somebody that was that was a very talented guitarist named Sam Melfrina. Melfrina, very talented. So Sam became really the heart and soul of what was going on. We started out, they had a drummer. We had a drummer that I don't even remember his name anymore, but the drummer, when they were first going, and it was Craig singing, and then the drummer died of cancer about a year after they got that all going. Sadly, I know. The initial iteration of this band, which ended up being called Proverbs by Sam's idea, Sam Melfarina. So, but Craig was writing lyrics. Craig was initially lead singing. They did do that a little bit here and there, nothing, all that fancy, and then things changed. It's like he wanted to get the idea of really being a potential band that might actually potentially do something within Christian music for a chance. So, they got Stu Karoff to lead sing, and got some different, found another drummer, found some other individuals, a bass player and the like, to actually form the semblance of a band with Sam guitars and Sam guitars, Stu on vocals, and Wayne Morris on bass, and drummer whose name I can't recall, and then things kept on for that way for a little bit. And Craig would write some of the lyrics. Stu, it's actually Stu's brother, wrote some of the others, and they actually had cut a CD. The primary song of theirs that Craig had written the lyrics for was a song called "Send Me," based on the Isaiah tune. I have probably the CD buried somewhere, but I don't know where it is. I'll have to see if I can find that at some point, or even check with Craig and Stu and see if they still got copies of it. Maybe they'll float me some digital copy if they still manage to find it. It's interesting. I may have it buried somewhere. I didn't get rid of it. I know that. So they did that. He was part of the band. He loved karaoke. In fact, when I moved with him as an adult, and I love to play music, he said, "No, that disturbs me. I like to have the noise around." My wife was the same way, by the way. But having music around, altered him, disturbed him, because he get pulled into music and he'd want to sing, what have you. He had his own karaoke bit. He just sing just for the fun of it, with the mic and the whole 9 yards. He'd go to, that wasn't really karaoke. It was just a mic and a speaker, really. Now I think about it. But he'd go and do karaoke, especially after I got married and we weren't there. He did that quite a bit. It was a passion of his to sing. He met other people around singing. He's just a byproduct of who he was. And again, a storyteller. As we roomed together, I mentioned that he grew up in Rose Creek. See, there was a period of time that he, back on the AOL days, AOL had allowed you to have like a little publication, a little page or what have you. So he started a literary journal. He called it Rose Creek Press, was it, or Rose Creek, where he, would collect stories, from people all over the place looking for character-driven fiction, because he was passionate about developing characters. He believed that a good story involved character. Now, some of that he learned from a novelist, Terry Davis, who he learned from at Mankato State University, but he was all about character-driven. And so we'd sit there, we'd go through at our little apartment, going through his stories. Actually, it started before that all collapsed. It started a little story bit where he was writing a vampire story. It was a vampire story, initially a corporate vampire, and then that was named Carlson, but then he had plans for an ongoing tale and connecting it to ultimately Judas with AIDS and other things. I don't even know where his old mind went, but he never followed through finishing that tale. The whole Rose Creek Press thing went, by the way, AOL changed what they do as things tend to happen, and that discontinued. But he had put out a couple issues in getting people's stories that were character driven and publishing it on AOL as a Rose Creek Press. And so, Rose Creek Press, there's a lovely dog poking their head in for attention as I'm telling the story, and it's somehow appropriate. But Emma, you'll have to back off a little bit, honey. Anyway, and this is all just at the seat of my pants from random talking. As you can hear the story, I hope you appreciate it. So anyways, Rose Creek Press. It was an experience for me getting into understanding a little bit about his mind and his fiction. In terms of his fiction, he got creative writing master's degree from Mankato State University, which is now Minnesota State University, Mankato. And like I said, learned under Terry Davis, the author of Vision Quest, a mentor to Craig in many ways. In all ways, I mean, he was what he learned after him and our friend Dennis Koslett had both spent a lot of time learning under Terry Davis. Anyways, his master's master's program was his first novel, and you can find it on Amazon.com. It's called Most Likely. I can remember him sitting and composing Most Likely. He actually had to take time away. So I was at that point in time, and we're talking end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, actually an apartment complex in townhome in Wayzata, Minnesota. He came, sat, wrote, finished his novel there. And it took him weeks of doing it, mind you, but he managed to get it finished. Of course, it was not the modern era, but decades after finishing that novel, it was the first thing he published on Amazon. And to begin his career as a novelist in terms of self-publishing his various works that he was able to complete and put out there. And one of the works, unfortunately, unfinished story sets that he planned. He had, first he had an idea for a comic book. He had a friend of ours at the time, Corey Hank, who was going to do the artwork and actually sketch some artwork and had a whole kind of superhero-ish element of that. But one particular individual was a character called Ember Cole, somebody that her touch would bring fire from the hands. It was a fire hero, so to speak, or a fire gifting of God, or whatever was in his mind fully. And actually wrote a good chunk of a novel about Amber and her history. I don't know if Andy's got it buried somewhere in all Craig's stuff, but he had put it to work, put some work on it, and he had finished it, and then he had come up with doing a prequel, which he did publish, called Shada, where this character was introduced, and then he was going to go back, but had rewriting, had things to do, and it just kind of languished and never was finished, even though he spent so much time on that tale. No idea where it was going in his head, but that ended up being something that was on the shelf. He had a lot of stories that ended up on the shelf, unfortunately. And he was telling some he had some ideas of things before stroke. You look at his Facebook page. You got a book cover page called "Sin with Kids," holding hands and sin listed. I don't even know where he was going with that one. Yeah, after he recovered from the first stroke, he was beginning to tell a tale during Reagan and beginning to tell a story that never made the light of day. And then he switched to doing a book that was, because he had the inspiration of what to do with it, in terms of what was going to be his lies theory that was going to finish up, and he only got the one rewrite of something else he'd done part of Amazon project for another deal. So lots of stories he didn't get to tell, but he'll tell more when he's in heaven. But that's a little bit of a tangent, and I'm just kind of rambling here. But that's only the author side. In terms of spiritual side, he was passionate about God, and passionate about understanding, and his understanding took him a few unique paths. And part of the unique paths was the role he had in my life in terms of helping me break through my own phobia. It wasn't really him, see, it was how God used him. God using him in a visual, prophetic way to give me images and understanding and ideas of God and change, and what was healing my own wounds in my heart to kick me from my own phobia, in particular of women at that point. But God had used them and started in a Bible study with Craig Hansen, a friend of mine, Jim Brinker, and a few other folks who I don't even remember who was in the Bible study, other than Jim, Craig, myself, and a couple others. Neil Sapata, I think, was one of them. And going with the little pamphlet that Larry Crabb had put together. It was directed at men and relationships, and we just talked about men's stuff and relationship, and had time for prayer, and all shared our stuff. I ultimately was the last one to share in terms of the weeks that we did, and got to talking about my own pain on those areas. We prayed, and suddenly Craig had these prophetic images, and there were some hard times that were going on as well that kind of escalated. As it escalated, God began moving and telling me and explaining to me, take my defenses down and be this, be that, work through, take steps, move forward, and grow in all sorts of ways. And coming from the images that God gave Craig that were directly related to the healing path he set me up. Craig obviously had a very visual brain, quite differently than my brain, which is lacking images whatsoever. So God used somebody else to give me understanding of images that always were understood much later down the road, in terms of what God was trying to teach me about him, as much as principles about love and growth and change and all these things as I walked through my own change. So that was in the course of that, as we were rooming together. Greg first connected with the open theology and Greg Boyd's mindset of God dealing in the present and not necessarily knowing the future. And Craig kind of gravitated that for a moment, but it was but for a moment. And part of the process of the prophetic, and we might even bring that up, is that as we were talking, and the imagery that would come up, Craig got more and more convinced that, and felt led that part of the imagery of the dreams, you really had to understand the Jewish mindset and the Jewish images from the Old Testament to understand what God was giving in the images he had shown us. And it ended up true. But in the course of that, Craig began to fall deeply in love with those elements of the structure and the seriousness taken within the Messianic Jewish Messianic theological perspective. It was never about not understanding grace and love, but he was very particular about the honor and respect out of love to God, and what those behaviors and those ways of living progress. His love for the Messianic brought him into learning deeply Messianic theology and teaching Messianic theology. He was even having a plan of writing a book on Messianic theology for the basic mind to be able to grasp and understand from a gospel-oriented way. And so, that became a significant part of his life, and a significant part of what bonded him together with Andy Hansen, Andy, who became his wife, Andy Hansen, and that was part of their connection. Part of the roots of what brought them together. In terms of the special man, the special woman, and some of you will get to hear from the special woman. If you're partaking in the summit, Andy Hansen is a bonus speaker, and that felt led to have her share a little bit of herself and her story as we go there. But if you're not in the summit, you may get a chance to still hear that, and it depends on what God needs. Anyways, Craig and Andy and the Messianic Church and Messianic theology. Now him and I and my brother and others had formed a online forum. I had just decided I needed to, got it directed me, I needed to learn the voice. I started reaching out to a few others, put together a forum for, lasted probably about 1.5 years, 2 years with Craig, Rob, me, and some odd, unique individuals that ended up partaking, some of which I may share as a little brief profile and uniqueness, because I don't know their full stories, and maybe I'll reach out to them and see if they want to tell more of who they are, and we'll see what God does there. At any rate, Craig had played and we had discussions. We argued about things between, especially me, him, my brother, and then whatever else was going on with the others that came in and out of the forum. I don't remember even all, but there were a few that stood out. It was a very special bonding time, and God used for some special things, even though there's a lot of argumentation, some over some weird conflicts over theology. And then we had a hard time really connecting and facilitating, but God had his purpose there. And part of the purpose there, and explain about this woman who came there, was encouraged and able to move beyond their barriers through the participation of the forum, and that person really was thankful for God's ministry between me and Craig in terms of that particular time. And so those are some elements of me and Craig's story a little bit. We had a whole lot of things that we did together just for fun. We went to the Vikings games together. See the logo on the hat. I had paid for us to have the Viking season tickets that we went through. We were at the 1994 disaster, sitting in the stands, back in the nosebleed seats. And one of the end zones, the opposite end zone of the missed kick, though, that was on the other side, and we sat there devastated. But we talked about football, we played fantasy football, we talked about sports, we talked about all these fun things. We did these things in terms of our mutuality. And then I got married, and then a few years later he got married. But after I got married, there was obviously always, it happened, some separation, but he's obviously like a brother to me. Then he got married, and then they moved to Oregon, and we still talked on a regular basis when he was moved to Oregon, but much less. We obviously didn't have the time face to face, and then the strokes cut down on what was, because you really couldn't have the same element there. And then I remember right before, the week before that, we had a conversation online. It had been the first one in a long time. He was able to do that and find a way to do that with speaking, or where we were really, maybe it was on the phone. I forget. No, I think it was on Facebook, or anyways, we had a conversation, whether it was by voice or whether it was by text where he was voice talking. We had a conversation, and I told him some things and things that God had pressed upon me. And then, a couple weeks later, the big killer strokes occurred, I almost thought he'd gone home then, but then got home and he left. He came back. I actually felt his spirit, within my room, sleeping at the house. And he came back. Um, and it lasted a couple of years, but he never was quite the same. He came back, for whatever God had him with him and Andy and whatever that part was. And until God took him home, and Andy said God took him home, and that the guy just said no more, time to go. Who knows what was God's plans? But it's missed the man dearly. Missed the man dearly. Miss what could have been the stories, but I know that God has more in store and perfected in a perfected way that is not about anything other than him being who he fully was. And Craig was always who he was. He stayed himself. Strengths, weaknesses, what have you. Even when he started having the beginning of health issues, well before the strokes, when his blood pressure went off, and whatever, and just being himself in terms of doing change. He on Facebook. The thing was, he would post his work, his treadmill. To help keep him accountable. But that's just for sharing what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing. I'm sharing what I am. He would have. I don't know what he would do right now, with the politics. He'd be really frustrated, I'm sure. But he was, he loved Rush Limbaugh. He loved the political side, the conservative side. That was part of who he was. Again, that having to have things a certain way, a particular way, and very, very particular about certain things. And so, those were the essence of the things I wanted to share about Craig. I had missed out on the opportunity to share anything in his memorial service because Zoom didn't work. So this is what I have to share. Heard some amazing elements from the people that shared a person that he was a great mentor. See, this is a man that he did care and love and demonstrate God's love. He would go out of his way to demonstrate love and to teach and to build up, even though we may not have always agreed. He was passionate about these things. I mean, part of what we talk about for hours is the various elements, dynamics, and explore things. And I miss that. So everybody watching and observing this, Craig Allen Hansen. And for those in the summit, you will notice that I am dedicating the entire summit to the memory of Craig Allen Hansen. You will see a memoriam of Craig Allen Hansen at the end of each video. And and possibly this picture or some others. I don't know exactly how I'm going to do all that, but this is my friend. He's not with God. He's no longer with us. I miss the man. I miss him dearly. And what I just rambled on here for whatever time this was doesn't even paint the picture, but I hope you can sense and see the care and the uniqueness and the greatness of who God made Craig to be. He said his time was short, much too short. Stories not yet told. Untold stories that he can probably fully tell in unique ways in heaven, whatever God's way to have him storytelling, because you can rest assured he will be telling stories and tales one way or another, because that's how God made the man to be. Telling the stories of love, speaking love and truth. This is what he did. Even going back, see what elements I didn't remember right off the bat. Back in our days, college days, and Campus Crusade, creatively, he became part of doing the live opening. The Campus Crusade meetings would open with this little comedy sketch that Craig would craft together and have various people, and often with the popular things, there was two couples that he used for a moonlighting live opening sketch. As Sam Elfrina and Katrina, who were to get married, and sadly that marriage did not last. And then Monty and Paula, I can't even remember Paula's maiden name, but they're Monty and Paula Skrabek. And they got how that Craig had worked with in the drama and moonlighting sketch. And again, we're going back to the 80s and 90s. Bruce Willis at his beginning. And that they played those characters, and had them. He's got a picture of those two and him. And so he was not really restrained. He'd be creative. He loved to be creative, and if there was a story, it's creativity involved. He'd want to do it. Music, he'd want to do it. All these things he'd want to do. What brought life and uplifted others, and demonstrated care and concern for others, and the care and the love of Jesus ultimately in his stories, even though his serial killer tale. Let me tell you this. His serial killer tale, ultimately was about a pretty blatant serial killer who got forced to have a change of perspective because of eye transplant, where he began seeing things from somebody that had a vision of love and mercy and a different way of looking at things than the distorted view of the serial killer. The Woodsman. It's a grim tale. It's pretty graphic in places, but you want an edge of your seat, kind of interesting, get at you tale. You read The Woodsman. Here's an interesting thing. He wrote a little tale called the Deborah Initiative. It was just a little short story. It wasn't anything big. What the whole concept was about robotic insect. Without telling you a whole lot more about the robotic insect, but this was before there really was robotic insects, mind you. The creativity that God gave the man. So check out Craig Allen Hansen, look at The Woodsman, look at the Deborah Initiative, Spoiled Rotten, and most likely look up any of those, you'll be able to find his books. For some reason, author page was disabled, maybe because of his death, maybe because of other things, I really don't know. But and his books, these ebooks are 99 cents. I don't know if Andy's got paper copies active with Create Space or not, or if they can still be had. I don't know if it can be had for The Woodsman, but for $1, you can get an ebook, on Amazon, and it's well worth the read. Each and everything that he's produced is well worth it. Heck, he's got a little comedy bit about he called Under Contract, about what it might be like to try and get a contract or sign a contract with a publishing company that turns into something crazy, worth a read. In terms of, do you want something humor? He had humor. As I'm winding this down, I can even remember that for an assignment in class, him and Dennis Coslet, myself, in the dorm room. And it was a comedy assignment, and the two of them were co-writing something and looking at my reactions or feedback for what they think would work at putting into the satirical, abstract, breaking rules kind of comedic prose that they put together. It wasn't anything that made it anywhere, but it was all part of their academic assignments, and that was a fun time, actually. So that's me, talking about Craig. In a way, I haven't been able to, sharing with others that want to hear, the heart of the man who had a big influence and impact in my life. And so, probably time for the rambling to end. I wish you well. I hope some of you are attending to all that is to come, you know, for those that are, watching the, becoming confidently unique in Christ, this summit. You know, but there'll be others, those that summit's well over by the time you see this, watch this. Yeah, you want to look me up, hook me up. You want to find out about access to any of those videos. You can check me out. Certainly at tim@timblake.net. You can send an email or pspringer@gmail.com. Either one will get me. In terms of that, pay attention because this is on YouTube, a YouTube channel. You can leave comments down below. You can subscribe, comment, like, you do that thing, what have you. I don't know all what's going to happen. I may well be doing profiles in uniqueness at some level, some way, and that I'm praying about. We'll see what God does, where I may just start interviewing some folks that aren't anything in terms of serving God, but we'll see what God stirs up after I finish this summit and everything else He's got me doing. Part of what He's got me doing is trying to pour into people's lives in terms of building you up to be who you are and to help you move along and grow, to up level who you are, up level, with a hyphen, up level, and to pursue growth in Christ. Christ is the connecting point of any growth. And so to grow, to move from glory, to move to your next phase of your created uniqueness and the confidence that you can have in Christ to be who He made you to be at the foundation of the world. And that's not the foundation of the world, that's the foundation of you. Before, when He spoke you into being, created you in your way. So hope you enjoyed what I had to share about Craig Allen Hansen, the man, the myth, the legend, or at least in my own mind. So blessings all. I hope you were blessed, and that's what I have to say now. God bless.